Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. At least here, good afternoon. Welcome to an Esoterica live stream here on Sunday. I know I typically do them on Fridays, which I'm thinking about changing. Actually, I'm not so much a fan of the Friday ones. I think I might switch over to Sundays because I think they're a bit more convenient, especially for people who work 9 to 5s. But welcome. I'm actually just back in from the New York Book Fair, which is a absolutely amazing thing. It's one of the highlights of my year. If you ever get the chance to go, if you ever find yourself in New York and in April, go to the New York Book Fair. It is just the I tell people it's like if the Library of Heaven had a gift shop, it would be the New York Antiquarian Book Fair. Just incredible, incredible stuff there. I was, I mean, everything from a $2.5 million copy of On the Revolutions by Copernicus that was once actually in the Rittman Library. That is the Embassy of the Free Mind, or the that famous library in Amsterdam. Oh, hey Angela, I see Angela, Dr. Angela Puka in the chat. We're gonna be working together here week after this one on an episode on the sworn book of Honorius, also known as the Liber Juratus. But I'm looking forward to that as well, Angela. It's good to see you. Um, but yeah, I mean, so yeah. Anyway, they had a $2.5 million copy of the On the Revolutions by Copernicus, which I did not get, but I did recognize it instantly as the one having previously been in the Rittman Library, all the way down to some more affordable stuff. I mean, nothing there is terribly affordable, but there was some good finds. I picked up a copy of the first printing of Chaim Vital's Eitz Chaim, which is probably in the top 5 most important books on Kabbalah. So that was a find. Not in a great binding. It's in a crappy library binding, but still an important first edition of Eitz Chaim. And I also picked up a later edition of Agriccola's De Re Metallica, which is an incredibly important book in the history of later alchemy, especially alchemy and how it ties in the development of mining. And so it's an incredibly important book in the what we might call the professionalization of alchemy, which is one of the major transitional moments as alchemy is entering into modernity and becoming what we think of as chemistry. So yeah, I picked up those two. Oh, also picked up a copy of some poetry self-published by Aleister Crowley. So that'll actually be up for sale here in a few weeks on the book side of the book business. So if you're interested in picking up an original first edition of some poetry of Aleister Crowley, which I will say he was a pretty good poet, as much as I understand poetry. So that was good. So anyway, the book fair was amazing. I get to hang out with Reed Moon, who I imagine some of you may know, who are fans of book stuff on TikTok. Reed has one of I think, the largest book TikToks on that platform over on TikTok, which I don't touch with a 10-foot pole. But I think he has a couple million subscribers there, and he showcases some pretty amazing books over on his TikTok. So we got to hang out a little bit and talk about some of the more interesting occult books. There were some great books on witchcraft there, which was fantastic. Also the Sokol books had a copy of an original edition of De Lamiis, which is a decisively important book in the history of witchcraft. The first real depictions of witches in that book. So that was a fantastic book. I got to handle it. I did not buy it because it was $95,000, but I was able to handle it, which is really neat. It's another one of the really cool things about the New York Book Fair is that, as long as you have a good reason to handle a book, they're more than happy to let you pick up and hold a $95,000 book and flip through it. They might keep an eagle eye on you, which is expected, but you really can flip through, and that's just $95,000 is really, plenty of medieval manuscripts there that are pushing $150,000. to several $100,000 easy. So I also had a cool couple of alchemical manuscripts, one in German and one in Dutch. I got to look through those, and I think the Dutch one had sold already. So it was again. So just a short advertisement for the New York Antiquarian Book Fair, which is still going on today, by the way. If you're in New York or in the New York area, you can go over there today. In fact, I'm sure you can get some excellent deals. And a lot of the booksellers are eager to, especially the European booksellers, do not want to schlep a lot of books back to Europe. So I'm pretty sure you can get yourself some fantastic deals if you're over there today. So also, I got to experience the New York earthquake. I don't know who all people here are in New York, but that was an impressive earthquake. I think it was a 4.8 on the Richter scale. I had never experienced an earthquake that strong in my life. We used to get little earthquakes when I lived in Memphis. I think it's a Tori Amos song. But we used to get little earthquakes, very small little earthquakes when I lived in Memphis. But this was the strongest earthquake that I had ever experienced. Very, very, very intense. It lasted for like 20 seconds. So the entire apartment building that I was staying at my sister-in-law's apartment. And yeah, it was absolutely bizarre. Um, I was holding a coffee cup on the table, and I could feel the table underneath me moving back and forth, and I could see the coffee sloshing around inside there. So yeah, I got to experience an earthquake. So I go from an earthquake in New York back to Detroit today, and tomorrow, of course, is the eclipse. So I'll be looking forward to the eclipse. We might be driving down to Toledo, maybe, or not Toledo, Cleveland, where my other sister-in-law lives, where we might be going down there to see totality. So here we get in Detroit, we'll get about 98% totality. There will be directly in the path of totality, right in the center of the path of totality. So yeah, we may go down for that. So yeah, so I'll go from earthquakes to eclipses, and it's kind of apocalyptic a little bit, a little apocalypse, a little apocalyptic. So quite a weekend, from rare books to earthquakes to eclipses. It was quite a weekend. Yeah, someone asked about the Agrippa class. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute, actually. But yeah, so this is we've been producing some pretty cool content recently. I think the highlight has been this recreation of this alchemical experiment that I did, which I still have the remains of that distillate over there, and it was a lot of fun to recreate something I think is relatively authentic to something like a medicine that would have been produced in the 17th century. So that was a lot of fun. I don't know that I'll be drinking a ton of that stuff, um, but yeah, it was a ton of fun to recreate that, and you can see the alembic is still sitting there in the background. It makes for a really nice piece of furniture when it's not being used to make medicine. I know some people asked, did it have any lingering effects? Not that I noticed. I don't really suffer from melancholy, which is I'm very lucky that depression and anxiety are endemic. But luckily, I don't really suffer from either of those really, and so I don't know that I'm the great candidate to try it on, but I didn't notice any strange effects after I took a little bit of it, and I tried some more later in the day just to see if it would do anything, but I didn't notice any effects. Um, who knows if I kept trying it, would it do anything? I have no idea. But an interesting little experiment. I'm going to actually try to recreate some other experiments as well. I have enough books with enough interesting little with the little things and enough little alchemical possibilities that I may tinker with them. Um, but yeah, stuff like with mercury and stuff, I don't want to mess with any of that. Also, because if I ever do that in that still, then that still basically becomes not food safe forever. So I don't want to introduce a poisonous chemical into it that I can't be sure is gonna not be there forever. So I might get another little distillation apparatus for something like that, but we'll see. What else do we work on? Oh yeah, we worked on the Antonio of Multoma, which is a fascinating little text of astral necromancy. In fact, one of the earliest texts of astral necromancy after Cecco which was just a really fun episode to make. Really like being able to get into the manuscripts, and luckily that manuscript is digitized on the Bibliothèque Nationale's website. So not so great resolution, but still good enough that if you're able to read medieval manuscripts in Latin, it's good enough. So that was a really fun episode. And then this episode that was a bit of a lark, and it did pretty well, was this episode on the lost books of the Hebrew Bible, which is a interesting thing. I don't know that other people noticed it in the same way that I did growing up, but just the fact that the Bible seems to mention dozens of books that don't survive. It's really fascinating, and so it was a lot of fun to dive into to some of those texts. So I have to say, it's really been fun. I mean, it's really been a fun cycle of content creation. We have another great uh, creation coming up. Um, one of which is going to be, like I said earlier, is going to be a collaboration with Dr. Angela Puka, and then next week is going to be a special episode, which I'll talk about more in a minute. But it'll be an episode on books, how to build an esoteric library. One of the questions I get all the time is, what books should I buy? What books are the sort of the essential books of an esoteric library? And I've actually built out an entire list of what I think would be the basic foundational texts of an esoteric library. So I'm going to be doing an entire episode on, if I were to, knowing everything I know now, if I were to go back in time and build a library from scratch, an esoteric library from scratch, what would be the essential stuff in that library? And the episode next week is going to be um, exactly that. So we'll be talking about books and what books I think are the most important. All right. Um, other stuff. Channel wise updates. Oh yeah, we crossed 600,000 subscribers. I see some folks saying congratulations. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we crossed 600,000 subscribers, which is absolutely bizarre. It's bonkers to me that a channel that is I don't know, so obscure and dedicated to such niche topics could get so huge. Um, I'm very grateful. I'm very thankful that I'm able to make this content, and that there's so many people out there that are interested in it. And I really am very glad to be able to serve the community in this way. So thank you for subscribing, supporting the channel. 600,000 subscribers is definitely not nothing. It's got to the point where I'm being recognized in public, which is kind of funny. I was at the book fair, like I said, and people there at the book fair were like, "Hey, you're Sledge from Esoterica," and so it's kind of a gas to I don't know, to be kind of mildly YouTube famous, whatever that is. But yeah, I'm proud of what proud of what we've been able to accomplish here, and yeah, onward and upwards. So we'll continue working on building the channel up, and who knows, maybe we'll get to 1 million at some point here sooner rather than later. The other thing that's worth mentioning is the Agrippa class. Yes, I'm going to be teaching an Agrippa class. It's going to be a college level, it was sort of a overview, a seminar on the occult philosophy of Cornelius Agrippa. We're going to be covering, obviously, the 3 books of occult philosophy, but also we're going to be covering texts that aren't translated into English. So we have part of his introductory lecture on the Corpus Hermeticum. We have his 3 ways of knowing God. We have a lot of texts, his letters, obviously. We have a lot of texts that have survived that are incredibly important about Agrippa's overall occult philosophy, that don't get talked about so much when you focus just on the just so much on the 3 books. In fact, we often it's not even talked about how the 3 books change. The 1510 juvenile draft is it's in some sense quite different than the 1533 published edition. So we're going to be covering Agrippa's occult philosophy in some significant detail, and so I think it'll be the only content like it on the internet. Um, sure, Earl Fontenelle has done some important stuff on Agrippa over at the Schwab podcast, but it's going to be a really deep dive into Agrippa. So it'll be free. Of course, patrons will be able to attend it live and ask questions live. So if you really want to get into the class and sort of like in the class, you'll want to sign up over at Patreon. But again, I don't paywall anything, so everything will eventually be accessible to everybody. And I'm looking to hopefully start it sometime, looking like probably May. I need to get a little bit more done. All the secondary literature that I want to review. I've reviewed, with the exception of one essay I want to go back and reread. And yeah, I want to go back and mark up a little bit more Agrippa. When I was down in Florida, I actually reread the Charles Nauert, which I think is one of the best intellectual texts on sort of Agrippa and his life and times and his intellectual history. So really went back through it for a third time and really marked it up. And so, yeah, I'm getting pretty close to getting this done. In fact, I need to get the syllabus written up, which I might do this week. I'll publish the syllabus on Patreon, and then I'll link it somehow, maybe in the community tab if folks want to take a look at it. But yeah, an Agrippa class coming up. That'll be the sort of the spring esoterica class, which I'm looking forward to doing, because I think Agrippa is one of these figures in the history of occultism that is definitely more celebrated than known. I don't know that people read him very much, honestly. I think people name drop the 3 books of occult philosophy a lot, but I don't know that people really get into his entire worldview, which is quite complicated. And I think a lot more complex than people realize, whether it's in relationship to his skepticism, which he was a radical skeptic, but also in relationship to developments in magic more generally at the time, especially in people like Ficino and the development of Renaissance magic. So that's all coming. So Agrippa class is coming soon. Um, and the last thing I guess I'll mention is I hope folks like the April Fool's joke. I totally thought to do that just like on Sunday before April Fool's, and it was. I hope it was funny. I hope folks enjoyed it. It was, I mean, more clearly a joke than the previous April Fool's joke, which was a long form joke, which was really hilarious. Pretending that apple bottom jeans was, in fact, a piece of the recovered piece of the Zohar. So I can see Vera in the chat. Vera, I hope that my Dutch was not terrible. My Dutch has never been very good, but I hope that it was, for my Dutch speaking people, I hope that that it was passable. But yeah, it was fun. Also, I should mention this about to throw some more shade at Brill. I don't know if folks know this, but not only is Brill super in charge of all this the rare book stuff, but also De Gruyter, De Gruyter is also merged with Brill now. So, sneeze. But another academic publisher, one of the most important academic publishers in biblical studies, De Gruyter is also now swallowed up with Brill. So I don't really understand how this is just not straightforwardly a monopoly at this point. They're going to control most of academic religious studies publishing in Europe at this point. Yeah, it seems like a total. It would be a joke if it weren't true, but at any rate, academic publishing. What a scam. So, yeah, I actually have an idea for next year's April Fool's joke. I have a couple different ideas, but we'll see if they pan out. All right, folks. Let's get some questions. Let's do some questions and let's get some conversation going. Thank you for taking some time on a Sunday to hang out with me and pregame the eclipse. So, all right. Christopher, sorry if this is asked before, but is there any esoteric literature involving eclipses? There must be. I mean, I'm not super familiar with astrological literature. I'm sure Chris Brennan has talked about this on his podcast, the astrology podcast. But my guess is that that's going to be primarily in the astrology side of esotericism, which I'm not super strong on. Um, what I would do if I were you is I would look at the Campion. Campion is the standard 2-volume history of astrology, and I would just look up eclipses and see what Campion talks about. Interestingly, Agrippa, for all he talks about in terms of astral bodies in the 3 books, never mentions eclipses to my knowledge. But what I would do if I were you, I would take a look at the Campion history of astrology and see what eclipses go in for there. One of the things you may have noticed about the channel that I don't do very much on purpose is I don't do any, what's the right way of putting it? Anything involving the news cycle or anything involving current events. So one strategy for growing on YouTube is to, if something is really big, like the eclipse is really big, you do have to do content about the eclipse, and that's a way of like making yourself relevant. I don't want to do that. I don't want to like chase current events like the eclipse or whatever. And so I didn't decide to do any content on the eclipse. I don't think it's inherently bad to do that. I just don't want to do it. But nothing I know of directly comes to mind when it comes to esoteric literature involving eclipses. But like I said, I would check out Campion and see what he says for references. All right. How is all right? Greetings from Greece. Thank you. 50 pages long. Oh, with the Enochian stuff. Hey, I'm glad that you put up with. I mean, I love making that Enochian material. The Enochian episodes are some of my favorite, just because I love that material and I love how crazy it is. But yeah, that material is nuts. It's positively nutty in the most wonderful way. I mean, the Enochian stuff is crazy in its own beautiful way. But yeah, and the Malleus Maleficarum episode is also important. I need to also do an episode on Martin Del Rio. That's also in the queue. So we need to do those. So one of those on Del Rio's book, which I frankly find Del Rio's investigation into magic to be a far superior text, far more interesting than the Malleus. Malleus, of course, gets all of the cred, and everyone knows Malleus, and Malleus is sort of famous for being famous at this point. But even by the 1600s, by the 17th century, Malleus had fallen out of favor. I mean, it ends up on the index. It's forbidden by 1600. And really, the book that's operating at the height of the witch trials as sort of the standard manual for the Inquisition and for the witch hunts and for understanding the occult in a general way is Del Rio. And so Del Rio, I would say, is actually in many ways just as important as Malleus, although no one ever talks about the investigations into magic. But I think it is a intellectually much more rigorous text, and of course it had huge ramifications, especially in the Catholic world when it came to witch hunting. Yeah, Ashley, books for teaching yourself Latin. I'm just a old-fashioned wheel lock guy. I would say that if you work through the main wheel lock book, the central wheel lock book, it'll take you, half a year to work through it. If you do it less than a week, you'll be fluently reading Latin in after doing that. And so I always tell people, wheel lock's sort of tried and true. It's not the best, I don't think, in many ways, but it's been so done and so repeated so many times, they've really gotten that method down. Now, it is a little bit of grammar grinding and translation grinding, which um, has real setbacks, and it's not perfect. Um, but I'm a wheel lock person, so I would recommend working through wheel lock and just really getting good at Latin via that. So that would be my recommendation. That would be my recommendation. saw a great video by Dr. Julia Martins about the surgeon alchemist Fioravanti, and it got me curious about the Academia Circuitum Natura. Yeah, is she the same person that did that episode on Paracelsus just recently as well? I think if I'm remembering correctly, her channel is relatively new. Let me see if it's her. She had a really great episode introducing. If it's the same person, maybe it's not. Um, Introducing Paracelsus. Let me see. Maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but yeah, there's a whole literature, what are called books of secrets that were published during the Italian Renaissance. Some of which were published by women. The most famous example being Isabella Cortesi, assuming she really existed. I think she probably didn't. But yeah, I'm going to be doing an episode on books of secrets, specifically books of secrets, and people like Della Porta, and sort of the transition out of Aristotelian magic, but pre-Baconian science. So there's sort of an interesting world of natural magic that exists there, and the whole literature of books of secrets is just really fascinating. So I'll be covering that as a general topic at some point soon, and then I want to do a specific episode on Della Porta and his book on natural magic, which has all kinds of fun experiments in there. But again, there's no sort of like totally operative scientific theory in those books. There's a theory of science in sort of a general way, but there's no sort of Baconian methodology that comes much later. And so there's an interesting period where Aristotle is increasingly rejected, but Baconian science is not taken off yet. And that period is populated by books of natural magic and books of secrets, which are all super fascinating documents. So yeah, I'll be coming back to that material at some point. Yeah, I'll be coming back to that material at some point soon. It's fantastic material. Thank you, Jeanette, for the congratulations for the 600,000. Again, it just boggles my mind that 600,000 people clicked a button and said subscribe to this weird channel. I mean, it's lovely and humbling. Mm. But yeah, I'm just super thankful and very happy that the channel is doing as well as it is, and um that I'm able to do what I do. I'm just really, really lucky in that way. Any videos you speak about the Elohim or the Elyon and the mistranslation of the Hebrew Bible of the book of Genesis? I have an episode about Yahweh specifically, but I'm not sure what mistranslation you're talking about. Which mistranslation you're talking about? Oh yeah, do we celebrate 616 or 666? He who has wisdom, he will know. Um, um, I do love the fact that we have two different manuscript traditions that seem to preserve two different kinds of gematria for Nero. 666 almost and 616 both refer to Nero, and it's fascinating. Depending on if you use the Hebrew alphabet or the Greek alphabet to calculate Nero's name, you get two different numbers, and we actually have those two numbers in the different manuscript traditions. And so I don't know. I guess it depends on whether you like your Kabbalah or your gematria in Hebrew letters or in Greek letters. Um, you can imagine where I land on that question. Will the Kabbalion be part of the reading list? No, it won't. Not that it's not important. It's just not it's just not where the channel would. It's not where we are in the channel. The channel doesn't cover that material. But yeah, the Kabbalion, it's important in the history of like modern occultism. It's history. It's important in the history of modern esotericism and the New Age movement. But it's not part of the historical Hermetica. The historical Hermetic text will, of course, be on that list, but the Kabbalion is not part of the historical Hermetica and will not be. But it being sort of a new agey channeled text with no real connection to historical Hermetica. Um, on the one hand, that seems to invalidate it for some people. If you're a religious hermeticist, I could see why. Um, but from the point of view of scholarship, it's absolutely just as important, just as important as anything else. All right. scroll down and get some other questions. Yes, Mill, thank you. I need to get back into classical languages. It's amazing how different translations of esoteric works like Thunder Perfect Mind will be. Yeah, I stress constantly that it's important to learn to read original languages. There's simply no substitution for trying to read things in the original language. In fact, I remember there would be people always, when I was growing up down south, who would try to convert me to their version of Christianity, and they would quote the Bible at me, and they would say, "Well, the Bible says this, and the Bible says that," and I'm like, "Well, did you read it in Hebrew or Aramaic, those chunks of Daniel or whatever, or did you read it in Greek? Because you don't know what the Bible says. What you know is what a translation says, and translations, especially of languages that are very different than English, like Hebrew, for instance, or Coptic for that matter, there's a lot of nuance lost. Not a lot of meaning lost, but a great deal of nuance lost. And in some sense, if you've only ever read translations, you haven't read the texts. And so it's incredibly important to really learn to read the original languages insofar as you can. And, to be honest, it's not so difficult to learn these languages. Hebrew is not a very difficult language. It's much easier to learn, in my opinion, than Latin. Aramaic is a relatively easy language to learn once you've gotten a good grasp of Hebrew. Coptic, it's not a difficult language either. They would say Coptic is far easier than learning Sanskrit or something. So these languages are not inaccessible. And in fact, I would say that of all the texts that you could actually teach yourself, would be a text like Thunder. Thunder Perfect Mind is a fantastic text to teach yourself Coptic with, because of the gender stuff, that you get the interesting shifts in gender, where so many texts almost always are in the masculine grammar. Well, Thunder switches back and forth. I say the same thing about Hebrew. The absolute best text to teach yourself to read Hebrew with is Ruth. Ruth is narrative, so it's not super difficult. There's not a lot of weird grammatical stuff in there, but you get women talking. And when you get women talking, you see the feminine gender in the grammar. And you don't often see that, for instance, if you're reading Leviticus, and especially in verbs. So Ruth is a great text. One of the best texts to teach yourself, to teach yourself Hebrew. Just literally parse every single word of Ruth. Take you a month, but you can do it. And after you've done it, you'll get quite good at working through Hebrew. So yeah, I would say, yeah, absolutely. Learn original languages. Coptic is a Sahidic Coptic is a great one to learn. You could learn Bohairic too, I guess, if you want to do more stuff in the Orthodox world. But Thunder is a great text to learn to learn to practice your Coptic on. Yes, I'm going to be doing some more practical alchemy stuff. I'm not going to be doing any metallurgical stuff just because it's not safe. I mean, I don't have a chemistry background. I have a intellectual understanding of the chemistry that I work there, but in general, doing things like distilling mercury, unless you have a good chemistry background and you have good equipment and a controlled environment, like really good vent hoods and stuff, it's not safe. It can be lethal. I think that one of the experiments that Dr. Principe was recreating from John of Rupasisha, he was creating, that stuff was off-gassing um, all kinds of terrible stuff, extremely toxic gases. And even out doing those outside doesn't guarantee that you're being safe. So without a good vent hood, without good temperature controls, without a really good understanding of chemistry, none of that is safe. So no, I would not be tinkering around with acids and stibnite and all that. It's the chances of getting injured are very, very high. And also, I think that I'm not a trained chemist, and so I think it's very important for public figures like myself to model good behavior and don't model bad behavior, and model behavior based on your expertise. And when you don't have expertise, it's important to stay in your lane and not do that. Now, it could be the case that what we might do, what I would love to do, is team up with Professor Principe and film content with him. So he's covering all the dangerous chemistry stuff, and then we can talk about it as we're doing it. So maybe that could be content we could work on it together, where I can go out to Johns Hopkins and we can do some alchemy in his lab. Or, it could be someone like Nile Red. I mean, maybe funny to team up with him and do some kind of stuff because he knows what he's doing. So no metallurgical stuff. Not because I don't have some background in high school, college level chemistry, but because I'm not going to model behavior that can endanger people, and I'm not going to endanger myself, frankly, for your amusement. So no, not going to do any stuff like that. All right. Esoteric books. Do I have a prized possession in my collection? Yeah, I mean, I think probably one of my prized possessions is I have a first edition. Well, not really first edition, but it's the first printing of Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy from 1533. So I have a copy of that, and that's a very much a prized possession. I have a copy of True and Faithful Relation from 6059, the John D material. What's the current Holy Grail that I would love to have? I don't know. I think I would. I'm wanting to find a copy of the Theatrum Chemicum Deutsch, which is the big collection of alchemical texts published in German. I'd love to get a copy of that. I don't know. I'd love to get like an alchemical manuscript. That would be a thing I would love to get. They're just extremely expensive, and I can't possibly afford that. So, not possible in my budget. But I have a couple things that are pretty nice. All right. Let's see here. Get a couple more. Where'd I get the glasses from? From Warby Parker. Yeah, I need to get some new glasses. I think these maybe the prescription's not right for them anymore. Yeah, we have a Warby Parker here in Detroit. I just went there and got them there. I need to get some new ones. Yeah, thanks for the nice comment about the Demiurge video. Yeah, I'm looking forward to making the next one as well. The next one is going to be covering the development of the Demiurge, specifically the development of the malevolent Demiurge in Marcion's thinking. Fantastic book. M. David Litw's The Evil Creator. If you haven't gotten it yet, it's a fantastic book. It's a little expensive, but absolutely worth picking up. Yes, I will be making a video about Faust and about Rudolph II. That definitely will be in the hopper. The Codex Gigas, it just has a big picture of the devil. It's real big and has a big picture of the devil. Otherwise, it's just a Vulgate Bible with some sections of the Vetus Latinus in there as well. But it's aside from the picture of the devil and the legend associated with it, with the monk or whatever, it's just a big Bible that happens to have a big picture of the devil in it. It's nothing. There's nothing more. Nothing more or less interesting than that. I don't know why it's so. I guess the devil just seems to make everyone go crazy. But yeah, it's that's kind of it. It's kind of it. Looking for an English translation of Cordevero's Tomer Devora. Found 3: the Dove Fink, the Motion Miller, the Riachi. The one I have. Let me see. Is the one from Judaica Press. Who translated it? Let me see. There's another episode I need to make. Is an episode on the Tomer Devora. So this is the Fink translation that I have. I don't know that I've read the other ones, but I do know that the Fink translation is good because I've read it and it has the Hebrew facing. So I don't know about the other two. They might be great, but I do know that the Fink with the Hebrew facing is the edition that I have and the one I've read, and I know that translation is good. So I would go for that one. Yep, another book I need to cover is a Tomer Devora. It's another really great sort of text of Kabbalah, but in a practical sense. Not practical Kabbalah, not Kabbalah Ma'asi, but like practical Kabbalah in the sense of how do you live your life informed by Kabbalistic practice. So the Tomer Devorah is really important in that way. For the Think edition. Speaking of Tomer Devorah, this is kind of a sideways thing. Also in New York, I got to hang out with Zevi, who we all love Zevi here. So Zevi from Seekers of Unity, we got to hang out in the Holy Land, better known as Crown Heights. And so folks may know that Zevi grew up in the Chabad Lubavitch movement, still identifies very strongly with being Hasidic. And so it was really great to be able to hang out with Zevi in Crown Heights, which I've studied in Crown Heights when I was younger at Hadar Torah, and go around in sort of Hasidic Lubavitch, Brooklyn, which was really, really pleasant. It was also funny. You could see the remains of the tunnel stuff, that we walked past the grate where that one Chassid came up and teenage Mishnah Ninja Torah. So it was kind of funny to see the paneling had been replaced and all the funny stuff about those damn tunnels and Hasidic Jews and tunnels under Brooklyn. But yeah, so it was really, but anyway, it was really fun and really great to hang out with Zevi. Yeah, he's going to be on the road soon, so hopefully he'll drop by here in Michigan. All right. Grab some more questions. I see some super chats. Thank you, Snow Fox, for the super sticker. Someone's asking about the significance of the number 3. Agrippa has whole chapters. If you want to know the occult significance of any number, go to Agrippa. Agrippa in Occult Philosophy Book 2 goes through every number and tells you everything in history about the occult significance of numbers. So Agrippa, like in many things, is your absolute benchmark for these for that kind of information. This is a funny one. So you summoned a demonic figure called your mom. Well, you can't stop it because you've done something to deserve what you're getting. I hate to tell you. There's no stopping mom. Ask a Freudian. Thank you, Doomdy, for the super sticker. Yahweh is Yaldabaoth. If you ask a Sethian Gnostic, they will tell you that. If you ask other people, they will tell you other kinds of stuff. But yes, that is what the Sethian Gnostics believed. Curious if you've heard of Diana Walsh Pasulka, translated text from the Vatican archives. No, I have not heard of her, but lots of people have translated things from the Vatican archives. This is a thing I think I talk about on the channel. No, I'm sorry, I haven't heard of her. People talk about the Vatican archives like they're really inaccessible and like you can't go to them. The Vatican archives are very accessible. If you have legitimate credentials and you have a reason to be in there, they're very accessible. The only thing that typically is inaccessible, aside from church officials, are like recent papal documents. But there's an army of non-Catholic academics working in the Vatican archives all the time. They found a recent, just in the past, 10 years ago or something, they found a manuscript of Spinoza's Ethics, which we thought were lost. We thought there were no manuscripts of Spinoza's Ethics, and they found one down there. Of course, they never found it because it was just marked De Deo. On God. You can imagine how many books in the Vatican archives are called De Deo. So they didn't even know they had it. So people like these weird conspiracy theories about the Catholic Church and the Vatican archives as if the Vatican archives just has all this evil stuff, or they have the temple furniture, or they have all the books of magic, or they have all this stuff. The truth of the matter is the Vatican doesn't even know what the Vatican has. Like there's so much material in there that they don't even know what they have. So it's really difficult to run a conspiracy when even the library itself doesn't know what they have in some cases. So the Vatican archives are not at all what people think they are. And again, this is just a place where people assume things about the Catholic Church. Not the Catholic Church has been a saint through history. But the truth of the matter is, the archives are actually very accessible, and scholars, non-Catholic scholars, work in there all the time, all the time. Any recommendations for Asian channels esoterica? I don't know. I don't know if there are any. At least not any academic ones. Um, I don't know of any channels that cover specifically like East Asian esotericism. I certainly can't, just because I don't know anything about it. It's not my academic specialty. So no, I don't know that any academics are covering that material online. Be great if they were. I would love to have that channel because I would love to learn and learn. I love to learn about it. Um, do you know anything about the editor Tarl Warwick? This is Stexenhammer 666 or whatever his name is. Those editions are all rubbish. You should not buy any of those editions. He just takes public domain stuff and just formats it, puts it on the internet, puts it in Amazon. They're often I've accidentally ordered one once and it was highly defective. So no, insofar as it's possible, you should either buy reprints of historical texts, or you should buy academic editions. But no, I don't think I've seen a couple of his editions, and they're they're a hot mess, highly unreliable. Love your work, thank you. Your measured styles help me in my style, my thesis. That's good. If you had to advise someone on necromantic treasure finding, how would you proceed? Um, I mean, I guess I would get a metal detector. That'd be the first thing I would do. I mean, there's manuals. There's several manuals. I've covered it on my channel. There are several different manuals out there for how to use medieval necromancy to find treasure. Paracelsus talks about it a little bit too. But yeah, I think the main thing is you just got to find a spirit who knows where some buried treasure is. I think you probably have better luck doing it in Europe. There's much more buried treasure over there than there is here, at least in the States. But that'd be my advice. Go to Europe, ask the demons there. But frankly, I think you'd do better with a metal detector. So good luck with that. One of the things that I think would be fun to incorporate into a video game or a role-playing game would be sort of medieval mechanics with treasure. Because one of the things that's interesting about medieval thinkings of treasure is that almost always they're somehow cursed, and treasure can like move and hide. It's not just like in the ground waiting for you to find it. It's like in the ground, but it's also like actively trying to elude you. And so I love the idea that the treasure itself is not exactly sentient, but it's sort of because it's magically infused, it has a life all its own. So I love the idea that the treasure isn't just like sitting in a box in the ground, but it could like trick you and cause you can try to cave in and things like this. All right. Thank you, Eccentric Tripper. If this material and subject matter continues to gain traction, would you reconsider academia if they offered you full access to a reference library? Um, I mean, look, I'm not opposed to academia. I don't have any sort of beef with academia. I still teach. I still teach in the academic world and have a great respect for most of academia. But academia has real problems, and that's not surprising because it's a huge, system of institutions, and so it's not bad in its own, and it's not bad probably overall. It just has some pretty serious and pretty profound defects. But if someone were to offer me a job in academia where I could continue to do this work, but also do teaching and also maybe like work with graduate students and stuff like that to output, research, sure, of course, I'd love to do that. I don't think of I don't think of that as like as a bad thing. I'd love to be able to work in a collaborative environment for knowledge production, and also work in a collaborative environment to rethink how we do knowledge production, whether it's here on YouTube or in the academy or in other venues. So no, I'm not one to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. But at the same time, I also wouldn't want to stop doing this because I do think that YouTube and public education are incredibly important. Public education is very important. I don't know how sure about YouTube, but I don't want to continue doing public education, and I don't think I don't think I would trade that for a job if it precluded my ability to continue doing public education, because I do think this is a very important thing. So, yeah, I'd love to be in an academic environment or have institutional support to do the work that I think is important, and also to work with institutions to better facilitate doing educational work. Absolutely, absolutely. Yes, I do plan to do a Picatrix video. I don't know when I'm going to do it exactly, but I want to work with Dana Trell, and I'm also looking forward to Liana Saif has an edition based on Arabic manuscripts coming out, and so I don't want to do an episode of Picatrix until that Arabic, the Liana Saif version is out, because I want to be able to have a conversation between the Latin Picatrix tradition that's very well covered by the Pareka and a Trell translation, and then put that in conversation with Liana Saif's work. So yes, but not yet. Yes, but not yet. Yes. Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you for that. Um, could you ever cover some weirder stories from various texts? I think that's what I do all the time. I think that's just what this channel is. Um, I think when there's weird stuff in these books, weird already in a relatively weird collection of things. I think I pointed out, like in the Abramelin, like the Abramelin has all the funny spell for summoning like a monkey band. I don't know why that doesn't get talked about more. People like really talk about the Abramelin as, all of uh, the more difficult spiritual stuff. But right there at the end of it is like a spell for summoning monkeys to play musical instruments for you and dance around. I don't know why that doesn't get talked about more, but I just find that hilarious. So I think I typically tend to cover strange things in these texts. And again, strange when it's already a standard deviation out. It all looks pretty weird. So, all right. I know some people are asking about the eclipse. The eclipse is just a shadow. That's it. It's just like a shadow cast by the moon. I don't really understand why people are getting so worked up about it. Um, like, do you get worked up by the shadow cast by a tree? I mean, no one's like freaking out about a shadow cast by a tree. The eclipse is just a shadow cast by the moon, and that's it. And I don't understand why a shadow would get see people so like riled up. It's bizarre to me. Um, but yeah, it's no different than any other shadow. Just happens to be a shadow cast by a moon. Well, our moon. All right. So thank you for the super chat. Yes, if you want to know the significance of number three, I can't tell you what it is because I'm not an occultist. I can tell you what occultists think it is, and I would say that the best place to look that up would be to go to Agrippa to look at the three books of occult philosophy. To go to book two, and in book two, Agrippa goes through all the numbers, and he covers all the numbers, or not, at least all the major numbers, and he covers it there. So I would do that. I'd look it up in Agrippa. Um, why do you prefer medieval alchemy as opposed to the alchemy of the Renaissance, John Dee era? Um, I don't really have a strong preference. I've covered alchemical texts all the way up to the 17th century, so I tend to cover more medieval texts just because those don't get covered very often. Many people jump right into Paracelsus, or they jump right into more Renaissance era texts. And I think that that's a mistake because the Renaissance era texts are very dependent upon medieval texts. And without an understanding of those medieval texts, I think that you really can't understand the Renaissance ones. And so for me, it's a question of historiography. That if I want to cover something, I really want to cover it in a way that's systematic, and a way that doesn't leave the audience behind. And so, if I just start off um, with a 17th century text, then I'm going to have to spend half the episode explaining how that 17th century text is in communication with the Rosarium Philosophorum or the Turba Philosophorum or pseudo lull or whatever. And so it's better just to go ahead and build the foundation, work up to that material, so that by the time we get to that material, it makes a bit more sense. And ditto with a lot of other stuff that I've covered. So it's not that I prefer one or the other, but it's just that the medieval stuff is more is just simply more architectonic. Do you think that there are still existing secret societies that practice demonic summoning rituals to attain and keep control over civilization? I don't think so. I mean, maybe there might be. I mean, I don't know of any. Um, I mean, I don't believe demons are real. I believe capitalism's real, and I believe capitalism is a far more terrifying demon than Astaroth or Lilith or any other made up medieval superstitions. I would far rather deal with a medieval demon, any or a demon from Christian mythology, Jewish mythology, than deal with like a capitalist. Capitalism is a far more terrifying monster. The pharmaceutical industry is a far more terrifying monster than Lilith or any other of these medieval entities. So yeah, I think that compound interest is a far more powerful form of magic than any body trying to summon, Asmodeus to get control over something. Trust me, I'd rather have, the S&P 500 is a far more powerful force than any necromancy. So probably wouldn't cover Gurdjieff on this channel, not because he's not important, but because Gurdjieff is just too modern. So this channel, we typically only go up to about 1750. And so that's well after 1750, and it's 20th century stuff. So we wouldn't cover it here. What were they doing in those tunnels? You can ask them; they would tell you. The truth of the matter is, they're in the tunnels because there is a split in the Chabad Lubavitch movement, where there are younger people who want more access to, space inside of 770, and so they were basically getting more space inside of underneath 770. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. I mean, it's people want to make a big deal about it and have conspiracy theories about it, but they'll tell you why they did it, and they did it because of the politics, the crazy politics that surround the Chabad Lubavitch movement in 770, which is a hell of a place. You said that structuralism explains your preference for Lacan over Jung. I could elaborate. Yeah, I think Jung is just making stuff up that's not real. The collective unconscious, I don't think, is real. There's no reason, I think, to believe it. It's never been experimentally shown to exist. I think archetypes also haven't not been shown to experimentally exist. The shadow, all of that. So I think that Lacan, as much as Lacan was crazy, at least is systematically crazy. And so his proposition that the unconscious is structured like a language, that drives a great deal of how his analysis works. And I think that insofar as we're talking about the unconscious as a structure, which can be analyzed over and against other networks or other forms of other kinds of entities, then we can at least have a systematic conversation around it, and thus we can have analysis. But if you posit the existence of metaphysical entities that we can't experimentally show are there, well, then there's not much we can do about that. And so, so for me, the reason why I don't prefer Jung is because I don't think Jung is at all scientific. And I think once you throw the scientific methodology out of the window, which again, at least Freud held on to that, even if I think that a lot of psychoanalysis is pseudoscience. Well, what are you left over with? You're left over with mysticism, and there's nothing wrong with mysticism. But when mysticism pretends to science, that is something I think is deeply wrong and deeply misguided. And I think Jung certainly made that mistake. So, insofar as Jung is a mystic, great. But insofar as he's a psychologist, and it's like insofar as psychology or psychoanalysis pretends to be a science, I don't see it. I don't see it. So, um, so yeah, I'm not a fan of Jung. Not to say he's not important. He's incredibly important. I just think he's worse than wrong. At least when you're wrong, we can systematically show when something's wrong. He just spins yarn, and we can't. There's nothing. There's very little we can do with that. All right. Let's see what else. But yeah, and again, I prefer Lacan to Jung, not because I think Lacan's right, but I prefer Lacan because I think that structuralism at least gives us a platform by which to have analytic conversations. I mean, I think that analytic conversations at least take the form of something like analysis, and otherwise, or take the form of something like logical relations at least. And otherwise than that, there's nothing we can do. Otherwise than that, it's just speculation and making stuff up. All right. Congratulations. Thank you. Starting a Cthulhu Dark Ages campaign. What book should I put in the monastery? Who's my historical antagonist? Um, you could pick an inquisitor, any inquisitor. That would be a pretty good historical antagonist. You could pick Nicholas Emmerich or something. What books are going to go in a library, in a medieval monastery? Um, Church fathers, Bibles, church fathers. You're going to have Lactantius and maybe not Lactantius actually, but yeah, you're going to have just a bunch of church fathers. You're going to have maybe Peter Lombard Synesis. You're going to have a lot of Augustine, Eusebius. So yeah, medieval monasteries are going to have a bunch of church fathers. So that'd be the kind of stuff. Now you might have a one-off book of necromancy, assuming that your monastery is sort of like Spondheim. But yeah, that's gonna be the kind of stuff that's in there. And also medieval monastery libraries were really small. If you could get a library of 200 volumes, that was huge. So medieval monasteries are absolutely not like um, modern libraries. The scriptorium library is exceedingly small. A couple hundred volumes would have been considered huge for the Middle Ages. So a library of a dozen volumes would probably be the most you could expect out of a medieval library. All right. Yeah, when do we learn about the absinthe? When it gets closer to being done, we're talking. I'm in talks now with the master distiller there again. We're going to do another batch, and hopefully by this fall, it'll be coming out. So we're planning for like September, October release. So more on that as it develops. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to getting absinthe on the market. Really looking forward to getting the absinthe on the market. The historical intersection of mathematics and esotericism, a little bit. I mean, I've done episodes on Plato and how Plato and later Platonism, or what is Middle Platonism, had a huge impact on the development of esotericism and mathematics, specifically in things like Neo-Pythagoreanism. So that's huge. That's all a huge impact. I've done some on that. I mentioned Agrippa a couple times in this episode, but yeah, it'd be interesting to go back through and see, people like Newton and other people and how they thought about mathematics vis-a-vis their esoteric religious beliefs. Kepler as well. So yeah, there's some stuff there for sure. I'd love to go look at some of that material. To go look at that material, but yeah, there's a lot to be said about it. A lot to be said about it. Interesting stuff. Did you ever cover some secret teachings in the classical Jewish textbooks? Yeah, I've already have. I've done a whole big class on Kabbalah, and yeah, I've covered a good bit of that material. I'd love to cover some more. I'd love to really get into to some of the classical text of Kabbalah, like Eitz Chaim and other texts. So, but yeah, I'd love to cover more of that. But I've definitely covered a great deal of Jewish esoteric texts already. I need to do an episode on the Sefer Zohar. It's just so intimidating, but that's coming up. I need to get one on the Sefer Zohar. Thank you, Zachary. I'm glad that the channel has helped people. And this is a message I get not infrequently: is people are using esoterica content to inform their tabletop role playing games. I really love that as a person who used to DM and who really does think that role playing games are just really great for people. They're just good for people's socialization and their souls, and they promote pro-social behavior, and I think they're fantastic. So so I'm really glad to know that esoterica is having some positive effect on people's role-playing game lives. So thank you. All right, let's see here. Yes, I do want to cover things about werewolves. So yes, that will be a thing I will be covering. I'm going to do an episode maybe next year on Halloween on werewolves. So there's great stuff about werewolves, and also I may cover at the same time some of the stuff Carlo Ginsburg about people transforming into monsters to fight witches, which is the Night Battles is famous book there. So so yeah, love to cover that material. Maybe do that around Halloween this year. You should debate Jordan Peterson about Jung. I'd rather fall in a well. Um, so I'm curious about your interest in mysticism and the occult, your role as a rabbi. I'm definitely not a rabbi. Um, why you hold a very rational perspective, like you definitively say demons don't exist? I don't definitively say they don't exist because you can't prove negatives. I just don't have any reason to believe they exist experimentally. So, but yeah, I'm not a rabbi, that's for sure. But yeah, I don't. Yeah, I can't say they don't exist because I don't have. No one can say something doesn't exist. But what I can say is I don't have any reason to believe that they do exist based on either my personal experience or based on experimental data. Let's see. Yes, definitely have interest in talking about Athanasius Kircher. I was actually looking at a bunch of his books at the Antiquarian Book Fair. There is a ton of fantastic books by Athanasius Kircher. The trouble with Kircher is that often Kircher didn't write some of the stuff that's attributed to him. It's sort of part of the research institution that was Athanasius Kircher. But yeah, I definitely won't be covering some of his more mystical text. Um, it's interesting. He was sent the Voynich manuscript, and from what we can tell, didn't really get into it. He didn't take a look at it. But Johann, I think it was Johannes Marcus Mark, wanted to send him the Voynich manuscript, and him take a look at it, but he didn't. So yeah, Kircher is a fantastically important character in the history of all this. If someone's asking if women can be rabbis, it depends on the faction of Judaism you belong to. I will say that even in the sort of left-wing Orthodox world, there are increasingly spaces for women leadership. The sort of a something like a rabbi figure can exist in those sort of like left-wing Orthodox spaces. But yeah, one in Orthodox in at least Reconstructionist Judaism, conservative Judaism, absolutely women can be rabbis. My wife is a rabbi. My wife is a rabbi. I would not want to be a rabbi, but not want to be one. Yes, I will be doing an episode on Hegel and the Hermetic tradition. Um, it's just a book. Yeah, it's a book. It's a topic I need to cover, just because now there's all these weird conspiracy theories that are floating around about Hegel and how Hermeticism is like baked into, or Gnosticism and Hermeticism are baked into communism or baked into fascism or something, which is bizarre. I mean, there's definitely some esoteric dimensions of fringe fascism, like Evola, but even the fascists thought he was crazy. I mean, it wasn't like he was a representative character of the intellectuals in fascism, Guido von List and stuff. But yeah, I will be coming back to this. But I do think that, like, I think I've said this before, that I think that McGee overstates the claim. I used to think that book was a lot stronger than I do now, and so I yeah, I will be making an episode about it, but mostly because I think it's given rise to a bunch of like weird conspiracy theories, and I think that, like I said, I think that McGee overplays his hand in his argument a little bit. All right. It's interesting. Yeah, the question about Mary Magdalene, um, the resurgence of interest in Miriam Migdali. I think there's just one. There's just all the conspiracy theory stuff about her and Jesus having married and their kid being the Holy Grail or whatever, all that stuff. Um, so I think there's a part of that. Also, I think that it's just a shift of seeing the importance and better understanding the importance of women in the early church, and women were decisively important in the early church, and seeing space for spiritualities that aren't dominated by dudes, and being represented, at least in some sense, by Mary Magdalene. So I think that that's part of what's driving it, is a sort of a Christian or Christian adjacent desire to maintain interest in Christianity, but some kind of alternative version of history, some alternative version of Christianity, mediated through the character of Mary Magdalene. Of course, the truth of the matter is we don't know anything about her aside from the little bit that's preserved in the Gospels. I'm sure she really existed, but we don't know much about her outside from that. And there's later traditions and stuff, and many of those later traditions get really badly corrupt because you have like conflations of her and other characters from the Gospels. So that would be my guess as to why I think that there's a resurgence in popularity with Mary Magdalene, is that she's sort of a foil against the what are taken to be the sort of patriarchal abuses of Christianity in the church via the lineage given over to either Paul or Peter or whatever. So I think that's part of the reason why people gravitated toward Mary Magdalene. So thank you. Regarding Thunder Perfect Mind, why do you think specifically the name of Thunder is attributed to the perfect mind? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. It's a strange title. What is it? Tevrontes nous teleos, I think is what it is in Coptic / Greek. But we don't know why it begins Tevrontes. Like the thunder is actually what it says. It's the thunder, perfect mind. But I think that the jury's out about exactly why it's called that. What exactly why thunder is there. So I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. I should go look at Hal Tussig's edition and see on his commentary, because he has a running commentary, linguistic commentary, why he thinks that it's called thunder. But I don't know. All right. Your wife is a rabbi. Yes. So she teaches things that you don't believe. Yes. How does that work out between you two? I mean, I don't expect the people around me to believe the things that I believe. I mean, that'd be weird if I like expected, my partner or anyone around me to believe the things that I believe. Um, I I expect any clergy to serve their community. That's what she does, and she does it amazingly. She's a fantastic member of the clergy. So yeah, she serves her community, and so it's not a question of whether or not she should believe what I believe. No one should believe what I believe. Yeah, people are somewhat bizarre about belief. This is a way that I think Christianity has totally won. Even when people aren't Christians, the obsession with belief is absolutely the most defining feature in my mind of Christianity. Even more so than the specifics of Christianity is the extreme focus on belief. And I think that it's fascinating to me is I see many people leave Christianity and maintain this obsession with belief. And that obsession with belief and how belief is sort of the most important thing, that to me is like, it's like, wow, it's Christianity has survived completely intact in the form of another religion, whether it's occultism or Thelema or Wicca or whatever, because what is matters is what we believe. And I'm like, this is um, for me, I'm like, Christianity is, you're still fundamentally Christian. It just so happens that the top of the pyramid is now shifted to some other set of beliefs, but the insistence on and interest in belief is so important. And again, it's fascinating to me that belief, but what people believe matters so much. Um, yeah, that people would care about it. Like I don't even care what I believe. Like my beliefs are of so little interest, I think. And but people obsess about what they believe and what they don't believe in a way that I think is piously Christian, deeply Christian. Are we getting any closer to the episode on Pistis Sophia? Speaking of belief, yes, I am working on it slowly. Yes, Pistis Sophia is actually just right behind me. Yep, I will eventually get around to it. I will get around to it at some point, but I don't know when. This year, I'm sure this year I'll get around to it. I'm sure I'll get around to it. Right. All right, let me see what time it is. Yeah, about 15 more minutes. This is a fun question. Some favorite architecture. I don't know much about architecture. Um, yeah, I don't know that I have like a specific famous favorite building. I guess I really like sort of Art Deco buildings a lot. Like I don't like Art Deco art in general, but I think Art Deco buildings are really beautiful. We have a lot of really great buildings here in Detroit, the downtown, that are fantastically beautiful. Um, I don't like brutalism, that's for sure. Um, it's just, everything looks like a Soviet apartment building. But yeah, I like Art Deco, sort of Art Nouveau style buildings, but I don't know much about architecture though. Yeah, I think that Matthias, I think I agree with you. The sort of obsession with identity, that this weird, it's like a pathological narcissism about me and mine, and like this obsession with me and what I believe and what I am. I don't know. It's never really. I've never understood it. It's always seems extremely strange to me. Like yeah, like I said, there's a kind of like narcissism to it that boggles my mind. So yeah, I've never really I've never really gotten into it. And also, I find it strange that people obsess over beliefs in a way. Um, for instance, I've had people say things like, "Well, you don't believe in uh, I don't know the occult, and how can you be a scholar of esotericism?" I'm like, you can be a scholar of Norse mythology and not believe Thor is real. It's a peculiar linking in my mind of the idea that one has to do a certain kind of thing in order to or believe in it to actually be a reputable source on the material. But it seems to me that it can cut in either way. That that one's belief could greatly bias one in one direction or the other. So so no, I find it a very peculiar kind of idea, but it seems endemic. I get the question all the time. I get the question all the time. Serious question. How do you get to your beard? My beard does not look good. My beard looks terrible. I don't do anything to it. I literally like just put random conditioner that I find at the drugstore, and that's it. I don't do anything. I've never understood. People have all these like weird beard care regimes, and I don't do anything to it. Nothing. Yeah, this question is interesting about the Rambam's 13 principles. Yeah, and they're very focused on belief, and I think that that's him having lived in a world where belief really matters in both the Islamic and Christian context, and so at some level he's sort of kowtowing to that. But they're also really weird. There's no other text like that, really. And the fact that that's the one that we can name, and it's like the only one, is telling. Where normative Judaism very rarely does credo like text like that, and I think that the fact that it's the one and everyone knows it is what is interesting. Also, the fact that Maimonides in general is a pretty heterodox guy. Yeah, the Mishnah Torah, people like Mishnah Torah, and it's celebrated, but read the Moreh. The Moreh is highly heterodox. You will not see the Moreh at a koilel, not a chance. Zevi and I were just talking about this, and so I would say that it's fascinating to me is that that text made it in, despite the fact that overall Maimonides is quite heterodox in that way. I think that's actually an example of him being quite heterodox. Let's see. What have you learned that surprised you the most, even changed your position? What's something that really um it's like a big thing that like I think that mm, I think one of the things that has surprised me as I've gotten older is how I used to feel. I used to be very, what's the right word? I felt very intellectually antagonistic to Kant. I felt a lot of intellectual antagonism to Kant, and I'm thinking really of the first and second critiques. And as I've gotten older, I've come increasingly to the conclusion that he must be right at some level, both the critique of pure reason and also the critique of practical reason. And so I think it's interesting that in some senses I've like come to terms with Kant in some ways, in a way that I never thought I would. And so this is a place where I have to like, begrudgingly admit that I think Kant got a lot of right. And I think that Kant solves problems that no one else has solved before. So I think it's a place where I definitely have changed my mind, where I used to, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have been much more militantly opposed to Kantianism, and now I'm much more inclined to some kind of version of Kantianism. So, um, your video on Satanic Panic brought in a lot of great, perhaps even Marxist criticism. Have you considered putting more materialist analysis in your videos alongside the lore? I would say that every esoteric episode I do is informed by my methodology, and my methodology is historical materialism. So, in some ways, if you don't like historical materialism, you shouldn't like esoterica. And if you do like esoterica, the channel at least, you probably are much more amenable to historical materialism than you think you are. Because I'm a historical materialist, and all the content I create is created out of the methodology of historical materialism. And so, and if you don't notice it, that's interesting. I mean, I notice it when I'm writing episodes. I'm like, this is how I analyze history. This is how I think history works. This is the mechanisms of how I think history works. So I would say that every episode, I think it's just more like in the Satanic Panic episode, it's just more, it seems more tangible because all that those events happened more recently. But when I'm doing episodes about the Cathars or other things like that, the historical materialism is baked right in. And so if you think that you don't like historical materialism and yet you find the content interesting, well, like I said, you might be more of a historical materialist than you think you are. Uh, Statement about Christianity and fixation of belief is activated my almonds. I love that phrase, activated my almonds. In Mississippi, we say crank my tractor. Um, where can I learn more about that? Recovering Mormon here. I don't know where you can learn more about that. This is an observation that I've had, as I sort of live in the world of Christian hegemony and not being part of Christianity, and sort of seeing Christianity from the outside and seeing it develop over time. I just see how it's very different than the tradition that I belong to. And that's just an observation that I've noticed, that I see everywhere around me, and I see it in what I would call post-Christian spaces as well, where fixation on identity or fixation on belief or fixation on faith, um, it becomes like that in itself is somehow performative. And for me, not coming out of that tradition in a lot of ways, it's like really apparent what's happening. But um, for other people, it's kind of diaphanous for whatever reason. I think it's diaphanous because it's just part of Christian hegemony. Excuse me. So I don't know where you could learn more about it. I guess I could think more about it, but I haven't read it somewhere. It's not like it's not like Weber and the Protestant work ethic or something like that. At least now that I don't know that it is. I'm sure I'm not the first person to make this observation. I'm sure someone's written a whole book about it. But yeah, I don't know of any other things like that. Do you like the grimoire reproductions from Blackletter Press? Are they good, serious study, or are they more like reading pleasure? Um, so I have a copy of their Pseudomonarchia Daemonum, and it's a fine edition. I think it's fine. It's not an academic edition, but it's fine. It's good. It's scholarly. The translation's good. In fact, the translation's great. It's a good, fun translation. I think the translation actually captures some of the sarcasm that's dripping off of Johan Weyer. Um, but I haven't checked the other translations, but um, again, they're non-academic, but you can still have perfectly good translations that aren't that aren't academic. They can still be studious and scholarly without being academic translations. Um, so yeah, but I can't vouch for everything, but at least the stuff I've looked at has all been good. Again, if not academic. Not that all academic stuff is good, frankly. Does Gnostic philosophy devalue the body or their mixed attitudes toward embodiment and materiality in this tradition? There are more or less extreme versions of it, but I would say that in general, dualism tends to be pretty anti-body, and that's not unique to Gnosticism. Stoicism can be really anti-body. Marcus Aurelius famously said that that you should just think of yourself as a soul carrying around a corpse. So Stoicism also, despite the fact that it was monistic, was a very anti-body and an anti-physicality in some ways. This is true of dualism. Um, Plotinus, famously, Porphyry, I think, said that Plotinus was ashamed to have a body. So it's not unique to so-called Gnosticism, but certainly something more. There's a spectrum of the antibody stuff that's definitely dominant in Gnosticism. But there's a spectrum of it. The Valentinians tend to be a bit more moderated than the Sethians, but I don't think anybody's going to come out to be pro-body in any strong way. That's also true of Orthodox Christianity. The Hermeticists are the closest thing to being sort of pro embodiment. In fact, the famously the Hermetica refers to the human being as a second god or a miracle. So there's a little bit better embodiment stuff when it comes to the Hermetica, but even then, we only really get enlightened when we die, so we can go back to the great light. So it's not a there none of them are real pro embodiment, I would say, in the end. Zachary, modern expressions of chaos magic. No, yeah, I won't be doing any stuff on chaos magic. It's way too recent. If you want to have content on chaos magic, you can absolutely go to Dr. Angela Puka's channel. She has several videos on chaos magic, and so that would be the place for that. So again, Dr. Puka covers more modern stuff. Um, yeah, I wouldn't cover. I won't be covering chaos magic. All right, a few more questions. That's a great question. What are the similarities and differences between Stoic ethics and Spinoza's ethics? Um, they're similar, very similar. Spinoza was deeply influenced by the Stoics, and especially Seneca. I think the big difference is that Stoic ethics tends to its natural law ethics tends to be a bit more teleological And of course, Spinoza famously rejected teleology. He was a radical anti-teleologist, getting some of that from Chastai Crescas, actually. So, so I would say that the big difference is sort of the focus on kind of natural law, and natural law, especially wrapped up in teleology. That's absent in Spinoza's ethics. But I think they come out very similar in the wash, and I think that's hugely important influence on Spinoza or the Stoics. All right, a couple more questions and we'll call it a day. Oh, hour and a half goes so fast. Um, so, what is the hand in your logo holding? It is holding a fish. It is the Maya hieroglyph for sak, which means to conjure a mystical vision. But the image is a hand holding a fish. You can read more about it on my FAQ, and you can also check out. I have an episode on Mayan bloodletting mysticism, and I talk a good bit about the image, the actual logo of the channel, and the image in that episode on Mayan bloodletting mysticism. Do you look forward to an AI which has extensive knowledge of and can converse effectively about esoteric topics? Um, I mean, AIs are always only going to be as intelligent as we have data for them to learn on, and frankly, the state of the data in Western esotericism is so poor that any AI is going to be pretty stupid, frankly. Um, we are in the infancy, folks, of the study of Western esotericism. We are at the very, very, very beginnings of this whole project. We are 3 or 4 generations out from having even a firm grasp of the layout of the manuscript tradition of Solomonic magic in the Middle Ages. There's 150 plus manuscripts of the Key of Solomon in Europe, or through the world right now. Those have never been collated. They've never been compared. We don't have critical editions of them. Um, so can an AI conversate effectively about things where it literally doesn't even have access to training data because human beings haven't themselves looked at those manuscripts and published them yet? Yeah, no, we are in the absolute infancy of the study of Western esotericism when it comes to things like medieval magic. So yeah, I look forward to it, but it's like 100 years off probably if the training data is anything. Maybe it'll get good enough where it can scan stuff in and learn it on its own. I'm sure that's possible. But but yeah, it's yeah, when all AI is doing is looking at Wikipedia and maybe some published articles, that just shows you just how very, very much in the infancy all of this is. All right. All right, a couple more. Looks like the sun's coming out. We'll go outside and enjoy the day. Babylonian magic preserved in Kabbalah, bastardized in Gnosticism and Hermeticism. Just like this is a string of words that have nothing to do with each other. I have no idea what that means. All right. How do you find community Judaism as a personal materialist beliefs? Uh, Again, most Jewish communities don't really. I mean, they don't really get in your business about what you believe and don't believe. It's more like how you fit into the community. So it's more about like how are you part of the community and what do you bring to the community, and how are you living in the life and the ritual life of the community. They're not really. I don't think anyone's ever gonna be like, hey, are you a historical materialist? Yeah, this is not the way it works. There's not like a vetting process or anything like that. But I get along. I get along quite well in my community. I think that's great. Um, do you think new technologies will be able to speed up analysis of the vast array of manuscripts? Um, sure. I mean, they'll help us read them. They'll help us scan them. I'm sure they'll help us translate them. So yeah, I think that that in the same way that calculators sped up mathematics but didn't replace mathematicians, AI will speed up scholarship, but I don't think it's going to replace scholars. At least it won't replace the good ones. So I think a lot of what technology will do will be to facilitate um, facilitate learning more quickly. But I don't think it's not going to replace people. I don't think, or at least not replace good people who are good at their work. Uh, is this witchcraft? Do I have any opinion on the phenomena? Oh, the UFO, UAP. I think it's mostly just parallax and FLIR anomalies. I've not seen any evidence that can be. I haven't seen any evidence of UAP and UFO stuff that, at least the more recent stuff, that can't be explained in terms of parallax phenomena and anomalies in the FLIR systems. There's a really great episode. There's really great content on YouTube that shows like what explains most of these so-called UAPs. Um, yeah, I think they're just anomalies in the FLIR and misunderstandings of how vision works in parallax. All right. Last couple ones. Best books to read for Arab Hermeticism, Alchemy, and Magical Astrology. I'm not an expert in this field, but I would say that von Blottel is going to be your best resource for Arabic Hermeticism. In fact, he wrote the book Arabic Hermes. And I would say Alchemy. Still, some of your best stuff is like early 20th century stuff on alchemy, like Al-Razi. Some of his alchemical works have been translated. The magic and astrology, Liana Saif is going to be your person for getting into that. Melvin Mushki also is going to he has fantastic work on the Arabic stuff on the occult. So yeah, I would take a look at that stuff. So yeah, Melvin Mushki and Liana Saif, some early 20th century stuff on alchemy, and that. So yeah, that would be the stuff that I think would be good to see. Yeah, definitely gonna not make. I mean, I'm not gonna make UAP episodes because I don't think there's anything there to make an episode about. I mean, you could make interesting episodes about sort of how alien stuff has affected modern spirituality. I mean, I frankly think a bunch of the UFO stuff is sort of like low rent angelology, frankly. But yeah, I don't think there's anything. There's no there because I mostly, like I said, I think it's just anomalies in the FLIR and anomalies in parallax. So yeah, all right. Do I think there'll be esoteric texts in the Herculaneum scrolls? I don't think so. Mostly because it was a scroll of an Epicurean philosopher, and the Epicureans were hardcore materialists. I mean, some of them, they were the most hardcore materialists of the materialists, and so I don't think much of what will be found in there will be esoteric-y stuff. I think that insofar as it represents the collection of a wealthy Epicurean materialist philosopher, it's probably going to look a lot like that material. So I doubt we're going to be getting Derveni papyrus kind of stuff. I don't think we're going to get Derveni papyrus kind of stuff. Be cool if we did, though. Ooh, shadow people. It's like Art Bell stuff. No, we don't. Not. I mean, shadow people are just a modern version of demons. So it just depends on what mythology you want to ascribe to, whether it's Christian mythology or Art Bell mythology or Christa Art Bell mythology. All right, folks. So I think I'm going to wrap up. So, like I said, next week we're going to be talking about books. We're going to be talking about how to build an esoteric library. If you're going to build a library of esotericism, what should that library contain? What are sort of the basic books you'd want in a library about historical esotericism? So, excuse me. So we're going to be looking at that material. Which I think it will be good. I think I get a lot of questions about books, and I think this will be a not a one and done, because there's always new books, and I will change my mind about what books I think are the most important. But I'm really going to have like a top 10, and then I'm going to go through each individual field, and at least the fields I work in, and then we're going to go through and talk about some of the major books and what kind of books you want on your shelf, and um, you know, um, yeah, go through there. But anyway, folks, thank you for taking some time to hang out with me here on a Sunday afternoon in April, and yeah, I really appreciate all of what you guys do in terms of supporting the channel and commenting and sharing the content, and super chats and thanks and being Patreons. Yeah, the fact that I get to do this work is just a real blessing for me, and I'm really appreciative of all your support. You know, to roll the channel up to 600,000 subscribers, so crazy. Um, you guys are amazing, and I deeply appreciate your support and your kindness. So I'll see you this Friday for I'll see you this Friday for a new episode, and then yeah, be making some stuff. Hope folks who are seeing the eclipse, I hope it's neat. I'm sure it will be neat. And otherwise than that, I'll see folks next week for a new episode on building an esoteric library. You guys have a great day. Talk to you soon.